Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we cut through the noise and give you the essential knowledge you need to be deeply informed. Today, we are taking a fascinating look at the whole philosophy and strategy behind personal progress.
Yeah,
We're diving into a stack of sources that explore what they call the intentional path, the one that leads to fulfillment, really, precisely because it's the hardest one to choose.
that's exactly right. And our mission for this deep dive really is to map out that productive path.
Mm-hmm.
We've got materials here that I think seamlessly blend this deep sort of existential wisdom on finding inner purpose with some extremely tactical, hard-nosed lessons from the world of business and innovation.
Which is such a cool combination.
It is. We're looking for the common threads, the links between self-mastery and, say, market strategy.
And the core insight, the challenge that kind of underlies everything we're going to talk about today, is this ultimate counterintuitive truth. The path of least resistance never, ever leads to lasting happiness.
It never does.
Our human inclination is to seek ease and comfort, but our sources are basically arguing that this very pursuit is what guarantees stagnation.
It's the absolute centerpiece of this discussion. And it's tricky because, we're evolutionarily wired to conserve energy,
Of course.
avoid danger, seek comfort. It's how we survived. But in the modern world, that same impulse can be, well, pretty destructive.
How so? In what way?
Well, if you follow that path of least resistance, the easy career, the non-challenging relationship, the predictable routine, you actively undermine the development of your own internal resilience. You weaken the very muscles you need for deep engagement, which is where meaning comes from.
So we have to intentionally, architect a life of productive difficulty? Is that the idea?
That's a perfect way to put it.
Our goal here, for you listening, is to extract the principles of that intentional growth, to really understand how constraints can lead to real innovation, and, crucially, to figure out how to locate that internal source of wisdom you need to navigate this whole path.
We are looking for the roadmap to building a life you actively run towards, not one you're desperately trying to escape.
I love that. Okay, let's unpack this crucial shift in thinking and jump right into segment one, the architecture of intentional struggle.
Right. So when we talk about architecture, we mean building something durable, something with a foundation.
Not just a temporary fix.
Exactly. And the foundation of a meaningful life, according to our materials, is built not on this fantasy of arrival, the moment you finally make it and can just stop working.
The finish line.
Yes, exactly. It's not about the finish line.
Mm.
It's built on what the sources beautifully call the fertile soil of intentional struggle.
I love that phrase, the fertile soil. It completely reframes struggle, doesn't it? It stops being a tax we pay for achievement and becomes the active ingredient that actually enables growth in the first place.
It is the ingredient.
But how do we define that? How do we differentiate intentional struggle from just, unnecessary difficulty or even pure masochism?
That is the key question, and that's where the architecture part comes in. Unintentional difficulty is just burnout. It's stress, it's noise, it's pointless suffering.
Right.
Intentional struggle, on the other hand, is choosing the hardest, most meaningful project that is just within your capacity to learn and grow.
So it's a stretch, but not a break.
Precisely. It's choosing to build the bridge properly, even though it requires learning complex engineering, rather than just, building a shoddy raft to cross the river quickly. The struggle is tied directly to the value of the outcome.
So if the outcome is highly valuable to your deep self, then the effort required, the struggle, becomes not just acceptable, but actually desirable.
Yes.
We're shifting the focus from avoiding pain to engaging fully with meaningful work. But, that is incredibly difficult to do in practice. Our brains scream at us to start when things get hard.
They do, every time. And that's exactly why the mindset you bring to the problem matters so much more than your raw intelligence. This leads us directly to this fantastic insight from David J. Schwartz. He says, the thinking that guides your intelligence is much more important than the amount of intelligence you have.
This feels like a huge rebuttal to our classic obsession with IQ scores, right?
Totally.
We spend so much time and energy trying to measure and maximize raw cognitive horsepower, but Schwartz is saying that the engine size is basically irrelevant if the navigator is asking all the wrong questions.
Exactly. It's a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to understand the mechanism here. Your intelligence is this remarkable processor, capable of solving nearly any problem you give it.
Mm-hmm.
But it is entirely subservient to the directives you give it. So the framing of your questions and the prioritization of your values, your operational mindset, that's what shapes your outcomes more profoundly than a few extra IQ points ever could.
Can you give me a concrete example? Like, how would two different mindsets direct the same level of intelligence toward wildly different outcomes?
Sure. Let's imagine two highly intelligent people,
Yep.
same IQ, same education, and they're both facing a major professional challenge. Let's say launching a new product in a really saturated market.
Okay, a common scenario.
Very common. Person A operates with a mindset guided by this question. How can I minimize risk and ensure I don't fail so I can maintain my current comfortable status?
Ah, the defensive crouch.
Defensive crouch. And their high intelligence is now being directed entirely towards stagnation. They will use all that brain power to calculate every possible downside, to find flaws in every exciting idea.
To talk themselves out of it.
Yes. And ultimately, they will develop the safest, most derivative product possible, which, in a saturated market, is guaranteed to fail, quietly. They become brilliant at avoiding growth and therefore avoiding opportunity.
So their intelligence is just being used as a highly effective anxiety mitigation tool, not a creative one.
Perfectly said. Precisely. Now, consider person B. Same intelligence, but they operate with a totally different question. What is the deepest need I can serve here, and how can I maximize my learning, even if it requires me to fail publicly 3 times?
Oh, that's a different game entirely.
It's a completely different game. Their intelligence is now directed toward profound development. They'll use their brain power to synthesize new information rapidly, to seek out honest, sometimes painful feedback, and to view every setback as a data point. They are strategically utilizing struggle to maximize their long-term returns.
So the intelligence isn't the limiting factor at all. The willingness to accept the necessary difficulty, the struggle that is the strategic choke point, that framing, that perspective, the willingness to be the one running toward the problem, that's everything.
It's the software, not the hardware. And choosing that path of progress, it's fundamentally a choice of values, not a calculation of ease. You're consciously choosing to value your own development over your current comfort.
And that choice of values, I imagine, deeply affects who you choose to associate with.
Absolutely.
The sources draw a very, very sharp distinction here between who we should seek out as peers. They create these two distinct categories, the accomplished and the strivers.
This is one of the most insightful concepts in our whole stack, I think. The advice is crystal clear. Your peers should be the strivers, the people who are currently striving, not the proud and accomplished who might be resting on their past achievements.
I have to admit, that sounds a little harsh. Why is celebrating the striver more valuable than celebrating the person who has actually crossed the finish line and earned the trophy? I mean, isn't that the goal?
It sounds harsh, but it's strategically vital. The trophy, the label accomplished, it implies a kind of finality, a completion.
The story's over.
The story's over. And when success becomes a fixed identity, it carries this massive risk of stopping your growth cold. The proud and accomplished may have already made their peak contribution, and now they believe the work is done. Their focus shifts to maintaining the status they achieved, not challenging the status quo, or, more importantly, challenging themselves.
So they're looking backward. They're spending their time recounting past victories.
Exactly. And the sources are quite explicit on this point. The moment we stop growing, we begin dying. In the ways that matter most. Anyway, creatively, intellectually, contributionally, the moment you settle into that comfortable definition of yourself, you start to lose the very edge that got you there in the first place.
The striver, on the other hand, is defined entirely by motion,
Wow.
by being actively engaged in the process. They haven't arrived, they're running towards the next goal, and all their energy is focused on future potential, which is, always limitless.
And that creates this incredibly powerful, high-velocity peer environment. If your peer group is defined by people actively trying to solve their next great problem, people who understand that the struggle is the fuel, that energy just compels you forward. You normalize productive difficulty.
Right.
You don't feel awkward when you fail, because in that group, failure is just a necessary phase in the striving process. It's expected.
But if your peer group is focused on recounting past triumphs, the whole conversation is focused on protection, on maintenance, on looking backward. That energy acts like an anchor, just dragging you toward complacency.
It's a huge distinction. The architecture of intentional struggle requires you to surround yourself with people who prioritize the process of becoming over the state of being. They get that the current moment of striving is always more valuable than the past moment of arrival.
Okay, so let's say we've done it. We've accepted intentional struggle. We've adopted the right guiding mindset, and we found our peer group of fellow strivers. But how do we translate all that energy into real-world creation, into innovation,
Mhm.
Because so often we wait for the perfect moment, the huge capital injection, the flash of pure, unconstrained inspiration before we actually start.
That brings us beautifully into segment two, because it fundamentally challenges that very idea that we need perfect conditions to start. We're about to see how friction and constraint are actually the engines of strategic progress.
Let's do it. Segment two, innovation born from friction, the strategy of constraints.
Okay, so first things first, we need to dismantle this inspired genius myth.
Right.
The one that holds that breakthroughs just happen when some lone genius is struck by a lightning bolt of perfect inspiration, usually in a perfectly equipped lab with, unlimited funding.
The movie version of innovation.
The movie version, our sources completely demolish this idea.
And Simon Sinek, who's cited in our sources, he offers a critical counter-narrative here. He says innovation is not born from the dream, innovation is born from the struggle.
And that is the absolute key. The dream, the vision that provides the philosophical destination. It's what the future you want to create.
Mm-hmm.
But the struggle that provides the energy and the direction for innovation. Innovation is inherently a reaction to a gap. It's born from constraint, from the friction between the desired creation you have in your head and the existing imperfect reality you're stuck with.
That makes so much sense when you put it like that. I mean, if you have infinite time, infinite resources, no external pressure, why would you ever need to think
You
creatively?
wouldn't.
You just buy the solution or deploy the most obvious expensive one. Constraints force invention because they make that obvious path economically or physically impossible.
They force lean thinking. They force ruthless prioritization. They narrow your focus down to what is absolutely essential. If you only have $500, you can't waste 50 on some marginal marketing experiment.
Right?
You have to ensure every single dollar directly supports the core mission. This is the difference between starting a venture in Silicon Valley with $5 million and starting one in your garage with 500. The garage startup is forced to innovate on distribution, on cost structure, on product design, in ways the well-funded startup never has to even think about.
So struggle isn't just some unfortunate side effect of innovation. It is the very condition that breeds invention. We don't wait for perfect conditions. We use the current imperfect conditions as our unique strategic advantage.
And we have a perfect, very down-to-earth case study of this strategy in action with Eliza Blank and the company she founded, The Sill.
The online houseplant company.
That's the one. The idea is deceptively simple. Plants make people happy. But the execution, especially in the early stages, is just a masterclass in using constraint as a strategic lever.
So give us the backstory.
Okay, so Blank quits her marketing job in her 20s to start this thing. 10 years later, she's grown it into a multi-million-dollar venture with retail stores, a significant employee base, and a huge national presence.
But it's the beginning that's the interesting part for our discussion.
The beginning is everything. Blank started with almost every conceivable limitation. We're talking severely limited personal capital, no physical storefront, and crucially, no established distribution network for living, delicate products, which is a massive logistical nightmare.
Right. Most startup playbooks would tell her she needed hundreds of thousands in funding just to solve that distribution problem alone. Refrigerated trucks, national shipping contracts, dedicated packaging.
All of it. But here is where the constraint forced a brilliant innovation. Since she lacked capital and all that traditional infrastructure, she was forced to start by hand-delivering plants throughout New York City.
On foot, on the subway.
I mean, whatever it took. And that initial constrained action, which on the surface seemed so small and inefficient, it actually solved multiple strategic problems at the exact same time.
Okay, break that down for us. What's problem number one?
Problem one, cost savings. Obvious, but critical. She conserved her precious operating capital by eliminating all those expensive third-party national shipping fees right off the bat.
Makes sense. Problem two.
Problem two, logistics mastery. She learned firsthand exactly how to package, transport, and handle the plants without relying on theoretical models or expensive consultants. She internalized the entire process. She built the expertise herself.
But the truly strategic payoff was problem three, right? Which was what?
Trust and community. By personally delivering the plants, she created this intimate, personal, and highly reliable interaction, one customer at a time. This is absolutely crucial when you're selling something alive.
You can't just leave it on the doorstep.
Exactly. That personal touch built incredible deep trust in the brand from day one. She wasn't just selling a product. She was selling an experience and a relationship. That intimate feedback loop allowed her to develop what we're calling deep roots in the community. She didn't even think about scaling nationally until she had maximized the local value of her constraint.
And as that local trust and, I'm assuming, small profits grew, what was her next strategic reinvestment? It wasn't buying a fleet of trucks or renting a giant
No,
warehouse.
not at all. It was content creation. She used those early hard-won successes to invest in educating her buyers. She created guides, videos, community forums, how to not kill your fiddly fig.
Which is a huge problem.
It's the biggest problem. And this solved the next major barrier to selling plants online, plant mortality. If your customers succeed with the first plant you sell them, they come back and buy a second, and a third, and a fourth. That content built a moat of expertise and community engagement around her brand, which in turn brought new, highly qualified customers to the site.
That is the classic growth pattern of the successful striver, perfectly outlined.
It is.
You use a current limitation to force an original, relationship-focused solution. You use that solution to build trust and gather resources, and then you strategically reinvest those returns into long-term infrastructure, like content and education, before you even think about scaling the physical distribution nationwide. The expansion of shipping across the country came last, after the foundation was completely securely rooted.
The entire business became this living metaphor for the products she sells, rooted deeply, branching thoughtfully, and photosynthesizing attention and trust into sustainable growth.
And this leads us to the larger strategic lesson here, what you're calling the deep roots principle. If the SIL strategy was so successful, why can't a competitor just copy it? Just do the same thing?
And that's the paradox of strategy, which is deeply rooted in our sources. The most important lessons are always principles, not tactics. If a competitor tries to simply copy the SIL's initial blueprint today, if they say, I'm also going to sell plants online and hand deliver them, they will almost certainly fail.
What? I mean, what's changed?
The landscape has changed, the soil conditions are different,
Hmm.
the market is now aware of the concept, customer expectations have evolved, the capital required is different. The moment Blank was hand-delivering those plants, she was in a process of rapid learning and adaptation. If a new company tries to copy that tactic today, they are copying a historical snapshot of a process that is already obsolete.
So the key to lasting success isn't having a perfect, static blueprint. It's having deep, self-developed roots and continuing to plant new seeds constantly.
The leader, who has deep roots and continues to plant new seeds, will always make following them difficult because they are a moving target. They're defined by continuous growth, not by their current configuration. Their success isn't defined by what they did in the past, but by the new, challenging growth they are pursuing today. They're striving.
And this applies so far beyond business. In your personal development, your deep roots are your core skills and your core values. If you're constantly learning, adapting, and growing, planting new seeds, your personal competitors say, the people who seek to overtake you professionally, they're trying to copy a version of you that no longer exists.
The whole game shifts. It moves from tactical imitation to strategic principles. You can't imitate the roots. You can only try to grow your own.
This is a beautiful bridge to our next segment because if the core principle is continuous planting and accepting struggle as necessary for growth, we have to ask the critical question that every single striver faces. How do we choose the right seeds to plant? How do we know which struggles to embrace versus which ones to just abandon?
That is the pivotal question. And it's one that external maps, market data, competitor analysis, all that stuff can never fully answer. It forces us to turn inward, away from the chaos of the external world and towards our internal guide.
Welcome to segment 3, the inward compass and the still small voice.
So if continuous struggle is the raw material for growth, we desperately need a reliable tool for quality control.
Right.
When do we persist and when do we quit? When do we dig deeper and when do we change direction entirely?
This is where the sources introduce a concept from Stephen Pressfield, which he calls the neshama, or sometimes the muse.
Right. Pressfield defines this as the still, small voice inside us. It's our soul, our deepest self. And this isn't just, fluffy inspiration talk. He frames it as a deeper intelligence that synthesizes our values, our experience, and our true calling. It surfaces when we manage to quiet the noise of our surface anxiety and all those external demands.
We often hear this idea discussed in the context of high art, right? The sources mention a choreographer asking that critical question, what's my next dance? How do I solve the logic of this third movement? Or a painter calling upon the muse. It's the filmmaker wrestling with a difficult scene, the chef designing a new dish.
And in that context, the muse is a very practical, problem solver. It's the faculty that allows you to wrestle with a problem that is too complex for linear logical calculation alone.
Mm.
It acts as a form of sort of whole brain knowing. But the crucial point the sources emphasize is that this is a universal access tool. It's not just for recognized artists.
I really appreciate that clarification because for a listener who might be a manager or a software engineer or a small business owner, someone who doesn't explicitly call upon a muse, how does this still small voice actually manifest?
It manifests whenever you face a cone of alignment and authenticity, rather than just a question of efficiency. The sources give this incredibly relatable example of the office worker stuck in a cubicle, turning inward and asking, should I quit this job? Should I stay? What should I do with my life?
That cubicle moment is perfect because those aren't questions that a spreadsheet can solve for you.
No?
You can logically list the pros and cons, the financial risk, the established benefits, career stability, but the analytical mind often just chokes when it tries to calculate variables like fulfillment or meaning or the true cost of misalignment.
Because the rational mind is stuck in known facts. But when you're pursuing the path of progress, by definition, you're constantly venturing into the unknown. You cannot logically calculate the value of an opportunity you haven't seen yet or the satisfaction of a skill you haven't mastered yet. So the logical mind just defaults to the known, which is almost always the comfortable status quo.
But the deep coin of alignment requires that different kind of intelligence than neshama, the muse, because it knows the true hidden cost of staying put.
And the conviction in the source material here is really powerful. It says the soul, we feel certain, has the answers and knows best. But let's be really clear on the mechanism they're proposing. This knowing is a deep synthesis of your intuition, your core values, and your lived experience that exists beneath the surface, layers of anxiety, external expectations, and social conditioning.
So it's the operating system talking, not the spam folder in your email.
That's a great way to put it, exactly.
Yeah.
And this connects back perfectly to David J. Schwartz. The muse is the faculty that helps us frame those guiding questions based on our deepest values. It helps us ask, what am I willing to suffer for, rather than what is the safest choice?
How does one actively access this still small voice when the noise of the world, the deadlines, the bills, the social media pressure is just so incredibly loud?
It requires cultivating stillness. It requires consistent practice, whether that's meditation or long walks or journaling or simply creating firm boundaries around your time and attention. The point isn't that the voice speaks loudly. It's that we have to make the external world quiet enough to hear something that is inherently subtle. The neshama doesn't shout over your anxiety. It whispers when the anxiety finally subsides.
This knowledge then becomes the critical navigation tool for the striver. Mastering the unknown begins with knowing your deep self. The map is external and it's constantly shifting, but the compass is internal and it remains reliable.
Think about Eliza Blank again. Her business map was constantly changing. A new competitor could flood the market, distribution methods could change, the cost of capital could shift overnight. If she had relied only on a static business plan, a map, she would have been completely lost. But her inner compass, her dedication to authentic connection, to slow growth, to building trust, that allowed her to consistently navigate the shifting terrain by aligning her strategic choices with her core values.
The roots are the self-knowledge, the values, the connection to that still small voice. When the storm of market uncertainty hits, the branches might sway, but the roots keep the entire structure grounded and oriented towards its true north.
And this realization, it changes strategy from being this linear plan for arrival into an ongoing adaptive process of self-alignment. And that process requires a deep integrity, which is what brings us to our final segment. We have to define the rules that govern all of this striving.
Let's do it. Segment 4, process over prize and the ultimate therapy. This segment introduces the sort of structural and ethical checks that are necessary to ensure our striving remains productive and healthy and doesn't just devolve into mere obsession or greed.
Yes, if we are striving for progress, we have to ensure we don't commit a very common and very fatal error, mistaking the destination for the journey. The sources caution very strongly against worshiping prosperity as a deity rather than using it merely as an instrument.
Okay, when does prosperity become a deity? When does that line get crossed?
It happens when the metric of success, the money, the title, the acquisition, becomes the sole focus of your existence, completely detached from the contribution that created it in the first place.
Right.
And when that happens, you are almost guaranteed to fall back onto the path of least resistance, because that path often offers the quickest, most direct route to the prize, even if it requires deception or cutting corners, or compromising your values. The focus shifts from the integrity of the creation to the speed of the acquisition.
So the focus must always be maintained on the quality of the process, because the process defines both the character of the builder and the resilience of the thing being built.
The integrity of the process is non-negotiable. And the sources give us the perfect timeless quote for this from the legendary coach John Wooden.
What's that?
He said, "If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over?"
Uh, that quote sounds like a simple time management principle, but its implications for strategic development are, they're profound.
They relate directly to what we now call technical debt in the software world, but it applies everywhere. If you rush something, if you ship a minimum viable product that is actually just minimum viable but it's filled with sloppy coding or poorly tested infrastructure, you're creating a faulty foundation.
And that fault doesn't just disappear.
Never.
Oh.
It requires mounting repair costs later, or worse, the eventual necessity of scrapping the entire thing and doing it over from scratch.
So you think you're saving 3 months up front by rushing, but you end up spending 18 months later just debugging, restructuring, and rebuilding because the foundation was rotten to begin with.
The quality of the process is all about compound returns. Building something properly, with deep intention and care, it creates resilience, predictability, and long-term leverage. A quick win, a facade of success, is inherently fragile, and it demands constant, draining maintenance.
The striver understands this principle deeply. They know the quality of the effort is the measure of the work. The accomplished person who's resting on their past success might think, I'll just do it quickly and we can fix the issues later. But the striver says, no, I will embed quality now so I can build faster and higher later on.
And the reward for that quality effort is surprisingly intrinsic. It links back to our earlier point about finding happiness not in ease, but in challenge. The sources introduce Josh Waitzkin's discovery here.
Okay.
He found that deep flow is the ultimate therapy. In fact, he says therapy is flow.
This insight connects the integrity of the process directly to our own fulfillment. It answers that deeper question. Why is all this struggle worth it?
Because what we are truly deeply hungry for is not the trophy or the title or the moment of arrival. It's the state of complete, immersive engagement in meaningful work.
Flow state.
That state of flow, where the challenge meets your capability perfectly, is where you lose self-consciousness and anxiety and you feel truly alive. The ego dissolves, the self-critical voices quiet down, and you just merge with the task at hand.
So if the path of least resistance never leads to happiness, then the state of flow of being completely absorbed in a challenging task, the very definition of productive difficulty, is the highest form of happiness available to us. The process itself becomes the reward, which validates the entire struggle.
And when the work is the therapy, you become completely independent of external validation. You aren't doing the work for the prize anymore. You are doing the work because the work itself is the greatest possible reward. This is what creates the life you run towards, defined by meaningful action rather than anxious avoidance.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. The structure of intentional struggle, innovation through constraints, self-knowledge through the inner voice, and process integrity through flow. There's one final essential constraint that seems to serve as the ethical container for all of this striving.
Yes.
And it's simple. Never compromise on kindness.
This is the essential check on ambition. If you're operating with integrity of process, and you're guided by your internal purpose, your striving should naturally lead to flourishing, not just for you, but for others. True success has to create conditions where things flourish, not just yourself, but your team, your community, the entire ecosystem you inhabit.
If your striving is destructive to others,
It's not progress, it's just extraction or domination.
and often compromising on kindness is the quickest shortcut to the prize, right? It's the path of least resistance to hitting those financial metrics. But it builds a brittle, toxic environment that will eventually collapse on itself, proving Wooden's point all over again.
We can connect this back to the sill one last time. The sources point out that plants make people happy because they're alive, they grow, and they respond visibly and reliably to care. A business built like a garden, with attention, with patient cultivation, and with kindness, it creates authentic value through contribution. It's not about manipulation.
It's the difference between building a successful organization and building a thriving, regenerative ecosystem. If the ecosystem around your striving isn't flourishing, you know immediately that you have strayed from the authentic path of progress.
The entire synthesis is incredibly powerful because it grounds these hard-nosed strategic concepts, like constraint-based innovation. in a deeply ethical and self-aware framework. The intentional struggle must be aimed at contribution, guided by self-knowledge, and built with integrity.
This has been an incredibly rich dive. Let's try to bring this all together for you, the listener, and summarize this living blueprint for progress that we've extracted from these sources.
These principles, taken together, they really define a different and I think more rewarding way of moving through the world. It's about prioritizing development over comfort.
Okay, first, embrace the architecture of intentional struggle. Plant yourself where you are, even if conditions are imperfect, and make the choice to run towards problems, not away from them. And remember that your mindset guides your intelligence far more than your IQ does.
Second, seek innovation born from friction. Use your existing constraints as the birthplace of your originality. You have to recognize cynics' insight that struggle, not comfort, is what forces a breakthrough. So never wait for perfect conditions.
Third, develop deep roots and listen to the inward compass. Understand that your internal compass, that neshama, that still small voice, is the only reliable navigation tool when the external map is constantly shifting. This is especially true when you're facing those fundamental questions of purpose.
Fourth, focus intensely on the quality of your process. If you don't have time to do it right, you definitely want a time to do it over. Build slowly, build properly, and let flow be your ultimate therapy and your inherent reward.
And finally, number 5, set the ethical container. Never, ever compromise on kindness. Ensure that your striving creates flourishing conditions for everyone, using prosperity merely as an instrument for greater contribution, not as a deity to be worshipped. This entire deep dive has been a powerful confirmation for me. The hard way, the intentional way, the growth way, it's the only way that leads to sustained happiness and profound contribution.
The garden within you is waiting. It's ready for you to cultivate it, but it doesn't plant itself. You have to choose the path of progress over the path of least resistance every single day. So the final thought for you to carry forward is really about active application. The only thing required is to begin. So what deep roots are you developing right now, and what meaningful seeds are you planting today?